Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my channel. I'm Frank, and today I want to take you guys through a couple of do's and don'ts of 3D printing and how I actually start my 3D printers and get that perfect first layer. So I print a lot of big stuff, obviously, and I've been printing for almost 2 years now, which is really crazy to say. But a lot of people can perpetually ask and message me on Instagram, hey, I'm having problems with that first layer. My prints aren't sticking, my bed's, wobbly, my filament's not the right temperature, I had a nozzle blowout. How do you combat and troubleshoot all these problems? So what I wanted to do is take you guys through the entire steps I do from the second I take the SD card from the computer and get it onto the printer. What I look for, how I clean my beds, a little bit of troubleshooting and problems you might run into, and maybe just some things you've never seen before, and help you understand the printers better. So this isn't a settings tutorial. I have videos on that. I can link that down below and maybe throw it up right here. This will help you understand Cura and maybe some 3D printing settings that you're not familiar with. So please go check that video out. But this video is for getting the printers actually running. And I promise, even if you've done this before, even if you printed, I hopefully can teach you something new about these printers, especially these Bowden style printers that Creality just loves. I also might have sent you this video because you asked me a question on Instagram or TikTok or something like that, so I hope this is a much better explanation than I can give you via just a DM or a message. So please watch it all the way through. I'll throw a list right here of all the things I cover in the video because I still need to cover them, and hopefully you'll have some answers by the end of this, but let's get started. So here we are again in the print room, and we're gonna be dealing with 4 different printers today because they all have slightly different interfaces. We're gonna be dealing with the really base level Creality Ender 3, a little bit more upgraded Creality CR10S, and that's been my workhorse. And we're gonna be dealing with 2 different style printers, which are both touchscreen, the Creality Ender 5 Plus, and then the Creality CR10S Pro V2. And all of these have just a couple different varying control systems. Fine-tuning them and dialing them in, and just some of the features that they have can really aid in getting that nice first layer and making sure your prints are more successful. But before we start, I want to explain to you guys a couple components of the printer that maybe you don't know the names of and what they actually do, so you have a better understanding as I talk about the printers. Hopefully, if you're at this point of 3D printing, you understand now that this thing over here is your extruder, this is your Bowden tube, this is your hot end with your nozzle, which sits down below there, this is your bed. These motors are called stepper motors, and you have typically 1 down here, 1 or 2 on your Z axis, and then you have your Y and your E, you have a filament runout sensor, you have your belts, you have your fans, you have your little Bowden couplers. So hopefully these simple terms you very much understand. I don't think you need to understand really anything more than that, but understanding how they all work in conjunction can really make your life a lot easier. So those are the things we're going to be talking about, and let's go take a look at all of these fun little gadgets over here. So let's take a look at these, and I will reference some other videos if you guys want more clarification on one specific part that maybe I covered in depth in another video. So first off, we have our Bowden tubes. Now, a lot of these Creality style printers come with these stock white Bowden tubes. Now, I always recommend changing these out immediately because they start to melt and get a little deformed, and they can start to back out of your hot end. This is your hot end and what it looks like on most 3D printers now. Please just ignore the colors because sometimes they just look a little different. This is a genuine Capricorn Bowden tube. Now this is a PTFE tubing that won't wear down and it won't back out of your hot end. If I push this all the way into the hot end, it backs up to the end of the nozzle. So I can actually unscrew this nozzle right here and push the Bowden tube all the way through. That's how the Bowden tube and the coupler nozzle work together. This tube sits against the back of the nozzle, so if there's a gap there, you can have some leaks. So ensuring that this tube has a nice flush cut to it, this little cutter is amazing. You put it in there, and it gives you a nice flush, perfect cut, so it meets up to the back of the nozzle. If this starts to back out, you can have a lot of problems with your printer. That's also why, if you've ever had this tube blow out and it starts to back out, if you can put this tube in here and you can pull it out really easily, you're gonna cause a gap right there, and that's not a good thing at all. So understanding how this whole system works right here, and that the fact that this tube needs to be pushed all the way down to the back of the nozzle is very, very crucial. Now, this is only one of your Bowden couplers. The other coupler sits on your extruder. Now, some of these printers come with this plastic extruder, and this is the second thing I recommend upgrading because down here, it'll crack. Now, as this spring tension is put onto it, this is what puts tension on this little gear. And you guys have seen this gear on your printer. It's what spins and moves the plastic. Now, if this loses, that's why you go and get a really nice aluminum extruder that won't break. Now, you need to make sure one of these little set screws here is sitting against the flat end on that rod that sticks up through your extruder right here. There's a flat end on that rod, and it's kind of hard to see. I tried filming a little bit of it, but you can't really tell. But one part of that rod has a shaved flat side, and one of these set screws needs to be tight against that flat side, or else the metal rod will just spin in that hole, and that's not what we want. So if you look at your extruder and that metal rod is just spinning, but this little gold gear isn't, you need to readjust it. Now, I just recently had a big spaghetti mess, and I promise one of you has seen this before, where you'll come in and off of your extruder, your Bowden tube will have been pushed out and your filament is just pouring out of this. A good indication that this is about to happen is every time your extruder moves and pushes filament through, you'll see this tube moving in and out, and over time it'll start to wear down and get blown out. This is exacerbated by the fact that you could have a clog. If you have your extruder making that clicking, popping noise while it's printing, all it's doing is pushing onto this tube, and eventually it's gonna blow out and you're gonna have a mess. If that happens, typically these break. There are tiny little metal teeth sitting inside of there that get stripped out. So most of the time, it's not as simple as just putting this tube back in and calling it a day. That coupler probably broke. Buy new ones. To help mitigate this, what I'll go and do is before I put a new tube in, I'll take a razor or a knife or even sandpaper, and I'll score and mark the outside of this Bowden tube. You don't want to cut too deep into it, but you want to give that coupler somewhere nice to bite. If you have this tube, you know how smooth it is. So if you put a little bit bite area on it, you can slide the tube in there and it's not going to want to come out. It's going to give it much more bite surface. So that's also a little trick that's helped me avoid nozzle blowouts this entire time. Next up, we have bed springs. These are the stock bed springs. These are upgraded bed springs. That'll just make the bed easier to level, and it will stay level. If any of you have your beds coming unlevel and your little adjuster knobs down here keep coming loose, upgrade your bed springs. And you can get a Bowden tube, a metal extruder, and upgraded springs for like 15 bucks on Amazon. They're very... So you'll quickly notice something about my printers. I don't have a stock factory glass bed on all of them. Any of them, actually. This is a normal plain glass bed. Some people swear by them. I can never get it to work. The beds we're going to be dealing with are the Creality Ultra Base, which have like a really microporous texture on them. And if you flip them over, a perfectly smooth glass base. Hi. And then we also have a magnetic bed. None of my printers have this anymore, but then we have this stickered textured bed that's on my Pro V2 and my Max. And these are all good beds, but the thing they have in common the most is that you can't use glues and adhesives on them. Before I print, I always clean my bed with some isopropyl alcohol, and that's it. You don't want to use any glues, sprays, tacks, nothing. If you clog up these printers, you'll actually clog up the beds and make them less prone to sticking. You want them clean. They operate the best when they're nice and crisp and clean and at the right temperature. So I'm gonna go through, clean them all. The next thing is, I'm going to assume your printer's built right. And what I mean by that, everything's tight that should be, and the things that are supposed to move are the only things that move. Your bed should only move in and out. Your nozzle should only move left and right, and your gantry should either go only up and down, or in this case, just down. Now, when you build the printer, if you want a really good explanation on assembling the printer and making sure everything's tight, please go watch that new Mingda D2 3D printer build. I cover all of this on making sure your eccentric nuts are tight, making sure this whole gantry head doesn't move. There's a lot of information in it that I'm just not going to cover right now. And also making sure that your bed isn't wobbly. If you don't know what an eccentric nut is, this is what it looks like on the screen, and it sits right back here. It's on the bottom roller of your gantry head, and if you put a wrench on it and turn it, you'll now notice my entire print head is loose, and we don't want this. This is gonna cause weird layer lines. So if you throw the wrench back on it and start to tighten it, it'll tighten up, and look at that. Now it doesn't wobble anymore, but you don't want it you want it to the point where it just stops wobbling. Don't tighten it anything past that, and you'll be good. And that same type of nut exists underneath your bed, and it's not a big deal with the beds that have these dual rail systems, but something like the Ender 3 that only has one rail, if the eccentric nuts are loose on one side, that bed will wobble back and forth a lot, and again, cause weird layer lines. The CR10 is the same system, so make sure that those wheels are tight and pinching, and you'll be good to go. The Ender 5 Plus really doesn't have that problem. All right, let's get these turned on, and I'm gonna start heating them up. Usually what I'll do is before I even slice my G-code, I'll come in here, turn the printers on, start preheating them, making sure everything's getting the temperature, everything's warm. I'll go slice my G-code, and then by the time I'm done doing that, they'll all be nice and ready to go. So I like to go in and manually set the temperatures. And I've heard people say don't preheat the bed and nozzle at the same time because it can mess with the printer. Maybe do some of your own research on that. I've been doing it for over a year and I've had no issues with it. Maybe it's because I live in Europe and the main power to the house is just different, but who knows. Now, the last thing I'm going to assume for you guys is that your bed is level. Again, if you want a really good explanation on leveling your bed, the Mingda D2 3D printer, my Ender 3 master guide, or upgrading my Ender 3 video are all good resources for a very, very lengthy explanation of leveling your bed, how it all works. But I'm going to show you again a real quick rundown of just how I do it. Now, these systems all can be leveled differently. The Ender and the CR10S will get leveled in a very manual system, but the 5 Plus and the Pro, anything with a touchscreen system and a leveling option is a lot easier to do. Now, to level the bed, you want the nozzle to be the same distance over all 4 corners of your bed. And the distance you want that is about the thickness of a sticky note. Now, there's the touchscreen systems. There's a little bit more of a automatic system on the CR10S, but I want to show you how to do it on something like the Ender 3, because if you can understand how to do it on Ender 3, you're going to be able to do it on anything. So the first thing you want to do is auto home. You want the nozzle in the corner. So however you get it there might be a couple different ways to do it, but usually there's an auto home feature. On the 5 Plus, it was leveling. And then on the CR10S, it was again, prepare and auto home. So the nozzle is where we want it to be. We're good to go in that aspect. Now, I see people disable the steppers. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, stop doing it. They're gonna go into your settings and they're gonna unlock the stepper motors and manually move the nozzle in the bed. Don't do that, stop doing that, because you don't know if you're moving your Z-axis up and down. Instead, you're gonna go into motion. It might be a little hard to see, and you can select move axis, and you're gonna move your X and your Y manually. That's it. So I'm gonna move my bed up a little bit, and the goal is to get the nozzle directly above the little knobs and screws underneath the bed. So something like that, right about there, maybe a little farther back. And then I'm gonna take that sticky note and I'm gonna pass it under the nozzle. And I should just barely be able to feel the nozzle scraping the top of the paper. The paper shouldn't get stuck, the paper shouldn't move too easy. You'll feel the nozzle scraping it. Then you're gonna use your axis to move around all 4 corners. So then I'm gonna move to this corner and I'm gonna do the same thing. Check to see if the paper catches or not. And you're gonna go around and do this, manually moving the bed. And if it's too high or too low, adjust your little knob screws. That's it. Now, a system like the CR10S has a prepare feature, level corners. So it's gonna automatically go to that point. You can, again, take the paper, check, and I just barely feel it scrape, and then select next point. It's gonna move. Do it again, and go through and do this on your entire bed. Do it 2 or 3 times, because as you adjust one side, the other side might become unlevel. Now, this should put you in the good spot for that good first layer, but you still go and do this. Now, if your beds are perpetually becoming unleveled, you need better bed springs. You need tighter bed springs so this knob, while your printer is moving, isn't unspinning and wobbling. That's it. Now, something like a 5 Plus doesn't need this. I just bottomed out my screws anyway. They're not going anywhere, but the Enders and the older CR10s, they definitely need this upgrade. Now, on the touchscreen systems, there's also something called aux leveling, and it's gonna give you, it's gonna give you the exact same features, all the corners and the center, and you're gonna go, again, do the paper trick, move it up and down, use the knobs, and call it a day. Now, printers with a BL Touch that have this measuring feature and give you all these cool numbers. So there's 24 or 25 points on here, and then there's 16 points on my Ender 5 Plus. This is just telling you how level your bed is opposed to each corner. So you want these numbers don't need to be all 0, but you want them as close as possible to each other. But make sure you have auto leveling on. There's no reason to turn it off. This is gonna make the printer do a systems check before it actually starts printing. There's no reason to not have it. It's a great feature, keep it on. So I'm gonna go through and start some prints. So we have a print right in here. Oh, my bad, I don't have filament loaded. Let's load up some filament. So when I'm going to throw some filament on, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it at a 45-degree angle, cut a little tip off right there, And then I'm gonna straighten a good amount of it out as much as possible. Now, if you're having little shavings build up on your filament runout sensors, you can download these little filament guides on Thingiverse and print them. So if you're trying to put filament through and it's just not going through your runout sensor, cut the tip, get it at a nice 45, and start playing around with it, and it should slide right through. Oh, oops, there we go. And then, with our printer being all nice and warm, I'm gonna push the filament all the way through by pushing down my extruder arm, manually feeding the filament through, and then you'll be able to see filament drip out of your nozzle, knowing you're all the way at the end, and everything's heated and working properly. I got some filament dripping out right here. See it? We're good to go. Filament is loaded. Also, if you have a plastic filament runout sensor, you can see there's a little hole right there starting to wear at the top. You can print little guides. I just drilled a coupler into it, and now I made a filament guide that never wears out. So our filament's loaded, our beds are clean, our beds are level, everything's tight. We have files. Let's print. Now, as my prints are starting, I want to show you the best thing to do to your printer while it starts that first layer. It is called baby Z steps, and this lets you actively level your first layer for that perfect squish. This is so crucial to printing that so many people sleep on, and it is such an amazing feature that you guys need to learn how to use. On the touchscreen systems, you're going to have something in here. If you go to adjust, it's going to say Z axis compensation. And also on the touchscreen ones, make sure eco mode is off. It turns the heat of your bed off halfway through the print, and your print will fall off. Don't mess around with it. Now, if you double click the control panel on some of these printers, like the CR10S, you'll get baby Z step right there. And see how this is more like spaghetti getting pulled along, and I can kind of pull it off. If I start to lower my baby Z step a little bit by bit, we're gonna start to squish down more. This is what you want. You want that perfect little squish like a nice pancake. But if you lower it too much, what's gonna start to happen is your nozzle is gonna get so close to your printer, no filament's gonna come out. And you're gonna start having weird issues where your extruder starts to pop and click. Look how much more that's squishing out now. And it's almost becoming translucent, and we don't want that. I can lower it even more. So now we're at -1, and now we're almost completely translucent. And if I lower it even more, now filament's not coming out at all. And this is a clog. I know the nozzle itself isn't clogged, but this is literally the indication of a clog. Filament isn't coming out, your nozzle's too close, your extruder starts clicking and popping. This is a very simple system, and understanding it can pay dividends in helping you troubleshoot. But now if I raise it up too high, let's raise it up 1.5. Look at this. It's not even sticking now. What's the point of this? So let's lower it back down again to maybe -2. There we are. Now we're sticking again. We have a good first layer, and we can save the print. You know how this is gonna go now. My first layer is fixed. I did it on that prime line. We're good to go. And we're gonna let this print go. There we go. We're not actually, I'm gonna cancel it later, but regardless. Now this print, same thing. I can check my prime line. I'm getting really good adhesion here. It's black, unfortunately, but I can kind of see and look. It's sticking really well. My Ender 3, it's actually a little bit too high. So if you go into these systems, it should be in tune, and you go all the way down, and baby Z step right there. And we're gonna lower this like 0.3 maybe. We'll try that. And then something like the 5+, it's an adjust, eco mode's off, and I can raise and lower my Z axis. Now, on the printers that don't have the touchscreen systems, you're gonna need to do this on every print. If you're doing this on every print, it means you need to re-level your bed. Now, I had to lower my nozzle, which means when I go to re-level my bed after this print, I'm gonna wanna lift my bed up a little bit. I'm gonna wanna make that sticky note just a little bit tighter, because then I know. Look at that first layer. Look at that. You can't pay for that. It's amazing. Perfect, except that. Don't worry about that. So, but on the touchscreen systems, as you can see, I didn't mess with this. It saved it. It's still -2.55, -1.6. You can go and adjust it. You can get it at 0, but there's no point. It saves it. It's always gonna be that. And my first layer is gonna stick every time. Now, changing out filament during a print. You're gonna run out of filament. It's gonna happen. Sometimes you might not get the right guess. Sometimes the filament might break. Now, a lot of printers have filament runout sensors. I don't even like letting these trip. I swap the filament while it's running. I call it a hot swap. Call it whatever you want. Now I'll try to do this when the print is either in the middle of an infill or an interior detail or whatever, but sometimes the pause feature on printers can cause a layer shift. It's just something that happens. They're not perfect. You've probably had it happen before. I have it happen all the time. So I try to avoid filament run out or pausing the print whenever possible. First thing I'm gonna do is, we're imagining that the filament's about to run out and we're gonna throw a new spool on it. I'm gonna cut the filament real quickly. On the new filament, have it ready at a 45-degree angle, the same way we loaded it last time. And you're gonna see it going through. I'm gonna cut it on both sides of the filament runout sensor so it doesn't come through. I'm gonna get the new filament and I'm gonna use that to push out the old filament from the runout sensor. I never tripped the runout sensor. Perfect. And then I'm gonna feed the new filament directly behind the filament that was running out. And you'll feel it with your fingers still getting pulled through, but uh-oh, it got stuck. Now this can happen. I leave my Bowden coupler loose on all of my printers. So I can go and unscrew this while it's printing, push it through, or if you really want to be quick and risky about it, pull it out completely, throw it in there, and push it through. Now we're printing again with a completely swapped filament. Now, again, you have to be very selective when you do this. You can slow down the print to maybe a 10%. I've done that before. Well, I'll come here and spin the knob and decrease my print speed to like 10. And by the time I do all of that, it hasn't even done one little line. It's totally fine as long as you're calculating how you're gonna do this. And the worst case scenario, your print pauses. That's the worst thing that's gonna happen, is your print you accidentally trip the runout sensor, your print pauses and you call it a day. I leave this little coupler loose right here for reasons like that. If I have a filament jam, if I have to change something out, there's no reason this thing needs to be smoked down all the way. This one, I'd leave tight though. What I've also done in the past is if I know I have enough filament to finish the print, but I need to swap it out, I'll just cut the filament and leave it in the runout sensor. I'll leave a little piece of filament just sitting in there, tripping the sensor, and then I'll feed the new filament directly into the extruder. And the very, very last thing I'm gonna show you guys is how to tell how much more filament is left on your roll. I don't know how much filament this is, but what I do have is a completely empty spool of it. So I can weigh this and know how much it is. Get a food scale. These little digital food scales are invaluable. I have one sitting right here at all times. You're gonna turn it on. You're gonna put your spool on there, and you can either weigh how much it is, or you can tar or zero it out. So now it knows how much that spool weighs, and when I take it off, 254. I'd write that down. If I open up this drawer right here, I have the weight of all of my spool holders, or my filament holders, right here saved. Then I'm gonna take the spool with the filament. I have 51 grams of filament on this spool. That's it. Now, say you don't have an empty roll, but you have the part that you printed out. That part weighs something, correct? I have no idea how much is left on this roll of Creality Ender filament. I don't have an empty roll of this. So if I take this and weigh it, it's gonna give me a certain measurement. It's gonna give me 322. Ignore the plastic, we're just, surmising here. But what I do have is the print itself. Now I took the supports off of it. They're in that little bin right there. Take all the supports, weigh your helmet, add up the math. 100 and something, 200, 300. This helmet weighs 200 and something. Add that to that total. Add all of your print up from that roll, and then minus 1,000 grams, that's gonna be how much that spool weighs. And now then say this weighs, I don't know, 150 grams. When I put it on the scale, we'll just minus 150 and we'll be, what, a little over 400? And that's how much filament I have left on this roll. When you're printing big things like this, I'm a big proponent for less is more. I'm not sitting here doing a bunch of E-step calibrations every time I swap filament. I've been printing a lot of helmets lately in preparation for another video, a filament review video. So you guys will be really excited about that. But I'm getting these nice smooth prints just off of these printers. This is a newer print from my CR10S, and this is with a 0.6mm nozzle. This is beautiful. This is one of my best prints ever. Look at that. And that's off of that guy. That's looks more upgraded than it really is. I'm not messing with Cura settings like a lot of you guys think I am. I'm not doing all these calibrations and stuff. My printers just work because they were built good and I understand how they work. So again, it pays in the end to just take your time and learn the systems. That does it for this video, guys. I know that was a lot of information. Sorry it's a little dark in here. My light's acting a little funny. But yeah, I hopefully that taught you guys something new about starting your printers and understanding them more. Just the little things that I go through and run through when I'm getting my prints started. And yeah, it might be a little tedious. Sometimes it might seem like a little extra. I don't do that every time. If I know my bed's level, I don't need to go and check it. If I have filament loaded and I know how much, I don't need to go and mess all that up. If I know my beds are clean, my beds are clean. So understanding them really just does help you troubleshoot. That's the main point of this, and it'll lead to a lot less heartbreaking failure. And maybe, you know, you'll just get those better prints. If you guys haven't already, if you could subscribe, that'd be awesome. It would help the channel out a lot. We're growing really fast. We're almost at 50,000 subs, which thank you so much. TikTok, we're almost at 1 million, like 1 million of something. Thank you. I don't know what to say really. So thank you for all the love and support. This is cool. If you guys want more information in the meantime, make sure you go check out the Discord. There's a link for that down below. We're over 2,500 members. It is an invaluable resource for 3D printing, cosplay, new people, old people, whatever your flavor or taste. Go check it out. It's free. Why not? As always, thank you so much for watching, guys, and you have a good day.